Welcome to episode 46 of our board game podcast, A Master's Degree in Rolling Terribly. I'm your host, Detty, and joining me, my very good friend, whom I wish all the joy, happiness, and sleep in the world over this festive season. Gaz! Say ho, Gaz!
Ho, Gaz! Maybe that could be the new intro. Ho, I reckon. Yeah.
Yeah, if it fits.
Yeah, if it fits.
I just want to say Merry Christmas to everyone. With the release of this episode, it'll actually occur kind of over Christmas. So I do hope that the new family tradition of listening to the latest episode of amDirt around the dining table with your family and friends is adhered to. And you all talk and share stories of how you rolled badly in that game of Catan, or how you got wrecked in Jaws of the Lion on the first scenario. It's these treasured moments that always bring families closer together. So open up that old copy of Monopoly and have a blast.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, actually. I think everyone should find a super luck-based game to play with their family on Christmas Eve. Like, we watch a Christmas movie. I think this year's going to be Home Alone because the kids haven't seen it. But I think everyone should whip out a luck-based, hopefully dice game. But if it's got heaps of luck from cards, play that, and then just scream amDirt every time you don't get what you want.
And just house rule the crap out of it.
Well, I'm sure Dwarf has an FAQ for whatever game you want to play.
Monopoly and Uno.
Yeah, if you're playing Yahtzee and you're like, oh, technically, is this a straight? Like 1, 2, 5, 6? That's a straight, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because you go 5, 6, 1, 2. It wraps around.
Yeah.
I'm sure Dwarf has an FAQ on that, so just hit him up.
You're watching Home Alone. What happened to Die Hard? You got me into Die Hard. Why don't you watch it with the kids?
Because I was explaining to the kids, because I did explain Die Hard, and Dash was like, who is 6, was like, oh, why can't we watch Die Hard? I'm like, oh, it's like just for grown-ups. And he's like, why? I'm like, there's lots of killing. He's like, oh, okay. And then he crossed the wires with Home Alone. And so he's asking me, he's like, so when he kills the people in Home Alone, I'm like, no. There's no killing in Home Alone. He's like, yeah, with the traps. I was like, no, they're different movies. And so he's like, can you tell me about one of the traps? And so I tell him. And then that just became a thing every day, every couple of hours. It was like, can you tell me another one of the traps? And how does he die? I'm like, nobody dies. So I don't know if he's going to be disappointed or what the outcome's going to be once we actually watch it.
It sounds like Die Hard would be easier, to be honest. You wouldn't have to really explain it.
Yeah, why is he not dying in this movie when he gets flamethrowed in the head? That seems really weird.
Correct.
So yeah, that's it. So I will report back.
Yeah, nice. On today's episode, we are going to cover Scenario 72, a giant block of ice. I can't believe that's what it's called. It's a weird scenario title. I thought when we unlocked it from the 71 section event that brought on that, it was a make-up kind of thing. But no, it's actually a thing. Weird name. And apparently Gaz is going to boss me around for a while with a topic about bosses. Which is very cool.
Yeah, I thought it just popped into my head. It's been topical, so yeah, I thought we could have a chat about that.
Lovely. Do you remember our road event?
Yeah, I do. I remember it like it was like yesterday.
Yeah. Well, it was another road event where we had to make a decision to do something to an animal or a beast or something like that. I can't remember what it was. We made a decision. It was kind of like
yeah. Right.
And it led to nothing. So it's another one of those ones where it's like, oh, let's pick the silly option, and then it says no effect, and it's like,
yeah, and you never know if the other option was good and like was a another event or a scenario or something like that, or if the other option was bad, right? And we chose the good one.
And we're actively we talked about this. We're actively trying to pick whatever the more ludicrous option is, right? Or whatever the one that's like it's telling you probably don't pick that one, so we're picking it, and it's not really working out in our favor.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard, which is annoying because we're trying to game the system in a sense, not to gain advantage so much as to see the interesting side of things. Whereas that I feel, yeah. So anyway, it is what it is.
So, sorry. So Scenario 72, a giant block of ice. This is part of Phil's PQ with 71, Invasion at the Dock. And basically, I'm starting to just value the story and the writing a little bit more with understanding why we're in whichever scenario that we're in. A lot of the times we're in there, it's just like, what's the goal, etc. But I'm trying to piece together at least some of the PQs, etc. So ultimately, we were enjoying a breakfast. Now, you weren't here for this. I don't know where you were. You and Mark were like wandering around doing, I don't know, stuff with Ormi and his like family or something like that. And Phil and I were enjoying breakfast when an attack took place at the dock, okay, between the Abaili, so the Abales, and the lurkers. They were assaulting a boat. Okay?
Okay. They're not allied.
No, they're not allied.
I thought they were just fish, so they would be
It's
allied.
fish versus crabs. Nah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Ancient rivalry.
Tale as old as time.
Mm.
So this led to an invasion at the dock, which was Scenario 71. So we actually rescued a Valrath character known as the Artificer, who insulted our frozen town by asking where all the guards were during the invasion. And to be fair, it's a really valid question, actually, because we were the only ones that rocked up. So I'm not too sure what was going on there. He introduced himself as Leroy, which Mark keeps calling him Leroy. So now he's just Leroy.
That's fair.
He's an artificer for the Storm Society, whatever that is. He's got a lot of gizmos, little gadgets and gizmos on his belt and in his backpack. It's like he's from the future.
Is he Batman?
He's not Batman, but maybe I don't know.
Is he a scientist?
No, I don't know. He's from the Storm Society. Just accept that. He has an artifact that apparently holds the power of an ancient sea creature, which the Abaili refer to a god, right? The Leviathan. Sounds kind of ominous and kind of scary, right? That sounds big if it's godlike. And the Abaili made off with the first piece of 3 pieces of the sacred scale. And they're probably heading to the second piece. So we had I think the first piece was the invasion of the dock from the guy that we'd never met who had it. And the Abaili took it then and there. And then they head into the second one. So we have to get it before they can get it, the second piece. Because if they can complete the artifact, apparently a giant thing will crush Frosthaven and everyone will be less happy and some even slightly cross.
Okay. Okay. Is there any indication as to why specifically this godlike creature that destroys everything would only target Frosthaven?
Because that's the only place in the world.
Okay.
Apparently.
Oh, that's.
It's also like lightly defended, apparently.
But isn't Frosthaven not near the ocean?
I don't know. I have to look at the map.
Oh, no, it must be because we've got docks.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Come on, Jesus. All right.
In Scenario 72, we then take Leroy's ship to a mountain far east, and upon entering a structure, we discover the remnants of old machinery and bones, and we come across a giant block of ice. To which Leroy explains, it's what we're here for. And we need to get it back to the ship, as the equipment to extract the piece of scale is located back on the ship.
Upon scale inside the ice?
I think so, it must be.
Okay.
Upon touching the ice, though, bodies begin to stir. Roll initiative. So that's pretty much how we ended up here and why we are here, which I found really helpful. Otherwise, it's just why we're moving a block of ice. With really stupid rules, by the way.
Yeah. It's really cool. Like I didn't get to play the first one, the invasion at the docks, but I got to. You showed me how it worked, and I think I actually ended up having it. Christmas is cancelled.
Yeah. Sorry.
I ended up having it. In my top 10. No, I think it was an honorable mention. It was either an honorable mention or in my top 10.
Because it sounded cool.
It sounded really cool. Like you got to swing across this thing, like boat thing into the other boat. And that just sounds awesome. And yeah, now that you explain the storyline to me, it also still does sound really cool. Like I'm really excited about it. And the idea behind this one, it makes it a lot more interesting knowing that's why we're pushing a block of ice.
The one thing I don't know is Phil's PQ. His PQ will have extra sort of text and flavor on there as to what started all of this, whether it was have breakfast at the dock and then see it to its conclusion. See you, right?
Yeah, it's a good point, really, because we're kind of like just the guys hanging around with someone else who has this quest, like, this personal reasons quest, and we're just kind of sucked into it. Like, hey, do you want to have some breakfast with me? And I'm sure there's more on his PQ than just have breakfast, but we're just there. And so he's like, oh, we got to go help this guy now. And we're like, yeah, all right, I guess why not?
Yeah.
And he knows why.
Yeah.
But he hasn't told us.
Yeah, that's weird. It's weird. But yeah, you missed out on breakfast, by the way. So
yeah, I know. That's terrible. That's probably where my 2 XP went.
So our scenario goal for Scenario 72 Scenario is complete when the ice pillar enters the E spot. At the end of that round, we read a thing. So at the very setup of the room, there's a big, well, it's an ice pillar. Thematically, it's a big ice pillar. In reality, it's a cardboard shit that we put into a standee.
Immersion,
Oh,
immersion.
yeah,
Don't
yeah.
don't ruin it.
So the special rules, I guess, in a nutshell, because sometimes these things are huge. The ice pillar can be targeted by attacks or push and pull in an attempt to slide it. There is a difficulty scale, which does vary during the scenario. And if we meet or exceed that number, we get to move the ice pillar in any direction 1 space. If fire is up, the difficulty rating decreases by 1. So if the fire is either strong or waning, and then if ice is up, it actually increases it by 1. Push and pull non-attacks will instantly succeed and push it 1, but only with a 4 player game, it'll only ever move 1 space.
So to condense that down, because this is what I needed to do once those rules got read out. Basically, it comes down to you can attack the ice pillar if you do the threshold, which starts at 3, and I believe it goes up and down as you go through the thing. It moves 1 space, right? If you've got push or pull in the attack, right, it reduces the threshold by 1 or 2.
2.
2. And if you have a non-push or pull
A non-attack.
ability,
Yeah.
like for example, I had a move 1, pull 2, right? Then I could use it on that, and it would just instantly push it forward without
right.
needing to hit a threshold of damage. Yeah.
That's right.
And then the frost makes it harder, and the fire makes it easier.
That's right.
So yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, so fairly clean. Our challenge card, or cards for this particular scenario,
right.
was Spiteful Retribution. Whenever any negative condition is removed from any enemy, it gains Strengthen, which I thought was very interesting, especially with all the conditions that we were putting out there. Especially with like disarms and all that kind of stuff. It was kind of like, oh, they're disarmed, they lose the disarm, they're strengthened. But then Gaz and I did a double disarm thing where it was just, it was really funny. And he kept getting upset.
Well, it's funny because before the shackles and like the banner spear, we really haven't had access to disarm. We haven't even really had access to immobilize that much, other than maybe a snowflake a bit.
Yeah.
So this is kind of finally have a party that can do these effects that drop off.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, by the way, now that you can do those, there's it's a disadvantage or it's a bad thing.
Yeah. It's amazing how much it screws with us. And then it got really, really interesting because the second one that we picked was Imitation. Add 5 random attack modifier cards to the monster attack modifier deck from among the perk attack modifier cards of any unlocked Frosthaven character, player's choice, not participating in the scenario. And this was sick. I loved this. And it caused the whole setup thing where we're like, okay, well, which character do we use? And it's like, well, you know, do we want the double crit but self-brittle from the Geminate?
So that I guess we'll talk really quickly what our mindset and decision-making process was, right? So basically, we had to go through and pick one of the classes we had unlocked that wasn't in the game, like currently playing, and get their bonus modifier cards they can add to their modifier deck, right? So the ones not being used. And so we looked through. We wanted to find which ones had the least impact. So I think we started with things like the Drifter, and you were like, well, there's a couple of +2s in there, or there's a +3 maybe. Yeah, +3. Oh, that's no good. We went to some of the other ones, and they tended to have a lot of +1s or these status effects that we didn't want, like the crab. I think it was suggested. I'm like, yeah, we're probably going to get disarmed and pushed, and a whole bunch of bad.
+1 target as well, the one that you keep pulling.
Oh yeah, the +1 target that never did anything for me. I guarantee they would pull non-stop and just wreck us with. So that was out. And then I think we landed on Mark suggested the Bone Shaper because I mean he played it, so he knew, and we had a look through, and that was probably pretty neutral. Like there has a few, like the heals of the way we were reading it would only affect the Bone Shaper because it's got the Bone Shaker summons and stuff like that, and there wasn't a lot of impact there. And then I suggested the Geminate, right? So I went through the Geminates one, and it's not that bad except for the fact that we could have put in the extra crit. So you remember that there was 5 random cards.
It's
we had
random,
to take the deck and just shuffle it and then deal out 5. So we didn't get to pick.
No.
And for those who haven't played the Geminate, one of the perks it can get is you get an extra crit in this. You have 2 crits, but if you draw that one, you get riddled. So that'd be good because whatever draw it would be brittled, but we'd also be getting crit, right? And we don't want more.
We want to reduce the damage output.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think in the end we went with the Bone Shaper, yeah?
Yeah, we did, and I've got them right here. If you if you want to see, so we shuffled the Bone Shaper cards, and then we drew 5. And in my head, I was like, "Oh, we should secretly put all 5 in there without like revealing them." But Mark started revealing them, and it was kind of like we got to see what we were up against. So one of the Bone Shaper cards is the 0. All right, so the +0,
Yep.
perfect. It's a Bone Shaper 0. We got one of the heals, right? The heal ally. That's a
Yep.
rolling
Yep.
modifier. And then we got one of the +2s with Dark and Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other +2s. We literally have 3
That's right.
of them.
Yeah. We looked at it, went like, this one seems the most neutral. There's only really 3 cards in there that are really bad, and that'd be the +2s. It's like, okay, well, let's draw those 3 and make sure that the monster deck now has 3 additional +2s in it. So
Yep. So yeah, we buffed them up and it was really exciting. But
it,
that's a cool
it did
challenge.
come up. Yeah, that was really cool. It makes me even more excited for the kind of design space that they've gone like into with these challenges because they've been really different so far.
Yeah.
I mean, we last scenario we picked 2 that were pretty similar, which was mess with the monster deck, but they've been really different, and this one was really cool. The I'll just mention the one we didn't pick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm pretty sure was
Oh,
the
I don't
that
remember what it was.
was the jump one, right?
Oh, yeah. Do they always get
Yeah, I
jump?
think yeah, I think it's like all monster movements move with jump. And so Mark was like, "Oh, that makes me a little bit irrelevant." And we're like, "Yeah, okay, cool." Now, knowing we have to do them all, we will come back to it, but hopefully we come back to it later when we don't have a trap.
When Mark doesn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No, it's cool. Well, that's because the last outpost phase we did upgrade the town hall to the
yeah,
next level. So that's why we're getting 2 now and keeping 2, and we're drawing 3, so that way we can
during yeah.
definitely get rid of one of those. The final setup, the final setup piece. We have a pet, a ruined machine,
Oh yeah, we do. That's right.
and
I forgot about that.
we are proud to announce that our ruined machine's name is, oh, you can't see that because it's all blurry and dark, is Weedy. So
Congratulations,
Weedy
Weedy.
the ruined machine.
Yep.
I have an app on my phone. I just looked for one. It was a randomizer. It's called Spin or something like that. And it's got like a spin wheel ultimately. And you just put everyone's name in. So I put a whole bunch of the Discord names in. Since then, we've had a whole bunch of new people jump in as well. So
Been great.
it's
So
going to
yeah,
be
if you want to get
interesting.
in, like, because we've only caught one so far, right? So you want to get in now, well, there's lots of options, and that's gonna, help you get your best chance of immortalizing yourself in our legacy game Frosthaven that we're playing through.
That's
So
right. And yeah, we spun it. Weedy came up. I'll have to try and see if I can get that on a recording somehow. So, but it's kind of tricky. But no, thank you for joining us, Weedy. I know you didn't really have much of a choice. You are now a ruined machine, and the ruined machine pet that we can use on our turn is all characters immediately perform shield 1 for the round, which is going to be
mm,
really handy. I can't wait to see when we use that.
yeah, I think looking into the future, I feel like it's gonna be clutch, right? Like it's gonna be so clutch and not forgotten about.
That's right.
So, but also, just as a little thing, watch the Discord because there will be a special little kind of call out for the people who manage to be pets. Again, if you join, want to be part of it, like we're going to assume everyone in here wants to be. So if you're in the Discord and you want to be part of it, you want to be named, either change your name to what you want it to be. If you don't, just shoot me or Detty a DM and just say, hey, can you not include me because I don't want to be on it, and we'll just make sure you're not included in the randomize.
Mm,
Randomize. So
mm.
no stress about that. You can freely hang out in the Discord and chat, but just let us know if you don't want to be named.
And if you think that your username might be slightly difficult to pronounce from Australians or anything like that, let us know. If you change your nickname if you need to, in
Yeah.
brackets or something. Because yeah, some are looking really interesting, and someone changed their name to Wart, and I can't remember who they were originally. But if we have a pet, it's going to be Pet Wart. Our monster combination for going into scenario 72 is Ice Wraiths, always fun. Living Bones, generic. Frozen Corpses, also relatively generic. And Steel Automations, which is quite exciting because I always like to see them, only because we've barely seen them. So I always want to see what other tricks and what other cards they have. What were your initial thoughts on scenario 72?
Yeah, I was pretty pumped about this. Like, it kind of reminded me of the like Team Fortress,
Oh, it's like a
or I guess
payload.
Overwatch. Yeah, payload. That
Yeah.
I think that was where I was like, "Oh, it's like push the payload," and it just seemed really cool. Some different monster types. It also had a really clear like we're going to be moving at this pace, which I felt was going to be good for me because I can kind of like stay with it and didn't have to rush. But yeah, no, from the get go, it looked really cool,
Mm,
and it also had our favorite ice wraiths in it.
it did, and more on that in a second. My only thoughts on the initial setup were, where's our snowflake? Because that would have been really handy to get multiple pushes and pulls, tops and bottoms, and all of that to get that moving, as well as obviously birdsing through the scenario. But look, I'm glad we don't have it, so we can do things properly.
Yep. Yep. Totally. And again, it just talks to I think there's some specific classes in some specific scenarios that I think make it a lot. It would we don't know, but I assume it would have made it a lot easier.
Yeah. It's fair to say that the majority of this scenario had a fairly good flow. We went from room to room to room, dealing with the mobs in a very standard kind of way. A couple of key things I wanted to point out during our run: ice rates didn't transform once,
Oh yeah,
which
that's
which
true.
was really weird because we had one in the corner that they spawned, right? So as you progress from room to room, there's previous tokens on the board that we did see. And it was like, oh, bet they're spawn tokens. And then you move to the next room, and sure enough, ice rates popped up. We had a normal one that spawned in the corner, and he was ranged. Normals are ranged. So we had to go out of our way backwards to sort of deal with him, which I found really awkward and annoying.
Yep.
Because he was like throwing crap at you. And I went next to you, but on the other side, so that he could continue to hit you. And I just remember you and I were just trying to deal with it, and I kept, trying to disarm him. Oh, that was the other thing. The original ice race in the room was like a Phil goes and books one, and then you and I literally, I think, got 3 disarms in a row on the second one, and it was glorious. It was great. That guy was
Yeah.
having a shit time.
Yeah, yeah, it was good. Yeah, and I think that first turn, it was like trying to line it up perfectly where because you were gonna disarm him, and I was like, I can also disarm him. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try to
Oh
go really late
yes.
so I go after him. And it's one of those rare moments where you kind of plan something and we don't obviously don't share our initiative. And we did it, and you went first, disarmed him. He went, so it dropped off. He got strengthened because of the challenge thing, and then I went and then disarmed him. And I'm like, this worked out perfectly. So yeah, it was very very good.
No, that was unbelievable. That is a 1 in 100 scenario situation where it lines up that well.
Yeah.
I feel like we never get things off that well.
No, no. Then what normally happens is that he would have gone 2 after me. So you would have gone, disarmed him, then I would have gone, disarmed him again, wasted it, it would have dropped off, and next turn he would have had strength and gone at like a 4 and it just smashed both of us.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of how it usually rolls.
Or you do something which then messes up Mark's turn.
That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's just
Yeah. Or
different
just move
ways
up,
that it
move crap,
goes.
things like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of other things I noted. Shackle's pure damage doesn't move the bloody ice block, which is really annoying because there was a period of time where I was doing my big 12 damage, 6 to myself and 6 to 2 other people, one of them being the ice block, because it's not an attack. Gaz kindly explained this to me and he was like, it's not an attack though. And I'm like,
Ask
that's
the
a
question.
great point. That
Just
was,
ask the question.
yeah. So even though I do have some attacks, that kind of made me a little bit sad because I feel like, oh, well, I became a little bit more on killing monster duty, I guess, than pushing it, whereas Gaz was all objective, right? As for
Well,
something
I
different.
mean, yeah, just for something completely different. You did a really good job of it though. Like you were pumping damage. Like,
The burst is good if I can line it up. The other good thing is actually something that we had in the scenario rules was the fire element, and I could consistently create that, which is not something we've had in our, well, not since the meteor actually.
mm,
Having something that actually is going to reduce that difficulty slider. Yeah. So we went there, second room. We had living bones coming up against us with their multi attacks. I like sometimes fighting these things. I think that they have a potential to be dangerous, especially with
mm,
their attacking the same target, using their multi attack on the same target. I like. There was a lot of shielding going on in this scenario. Not a lot of fat packs. It was always like 2, but then 2 spawning behind all the time. So it
yeah,
kind of had a good flow to it as we're slowly moving this thing along. The other thing I actually enjoyed was also we couldn't progress to the next room. We had to push the ice thing into the door, which then meant that we had to keep going. There was no way we could cheese it ultimately by burning through everything while someone was left behind pushing this thing.
yeah. I think it's a really good point, and it was a really clever design thing because we had to move this thing along to unlock the next room. So you couldn't, you could spend some time just sitting there killing everything, but because you can only move it one space at a time,
Mm,
that then going to limit how you do that. So I think we found a good balance of moving it along and killing things, and it was never really stationary for that long. But it did. It meant that you couldn't just like zip ahead, open all the rooms, pull all the monsters back, kill them, and then just shift the thing along. So
And it also meant if you went later with an initiative and the last creature dies or something like that, you've got something you can still attack. You can still do something. It's not wasted. You still get your XP and all that kind of stuff from those attacks.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, because and there was actually a couple of situations where I think I didn't have much. I had like a move, and then I was like, oh, I'll just do a standard attack 2 on the pillar, and I crit.
Mm.
And so it actually did move, and so it meant instead of what felt like a wasted turn, I was actually like, "Oh, that was amazing." And I think Mark did the
Mark
same
did
thing.
as well. Yeah.
I think he drew his +2, to actually get it up there. Like, he was just like, "Yeah, okay, I'll hit it." But we were both talking about channeling and what we wanted, right? You were the one that was like, "I'm gonna hit it, but I'm probably gonna draw my -1 or -2." Or like, I think you said, "The only thing that can screw me here is my miss." And then as you were pulling it, all my -2, and there's my -2.
Yeah.
So, I feel like you just need to be more positive.
You want to talk about attack modifier decks? How many times did you miss?
Oh, all the times. Like, I'm like the new Phil, except instead of, like, critting all the time and doing heaps of damage, I just miss all the time.
Yeah, and
Gross.
that is
It's
an
really
important
gross.
note because Phil, I think 3 times in a row, pulled his crit from the top card of his A&D. It was crit, giggle, destroy, shuffle, crit, giggle, destroy, shuffle.
Yeah.
And it was pretty amazing. And then after that, he stopped and it went all weird and he missed. And it was kind of like, and then you were doing the same thing but misses.
Yeah. Yeah, so
So we had frozen corpses in the third room. So for something a little bit different, these things are, we're getting to a stage where they're getting a little meaty. I'm trying to play it up as they're scary and all that. Like, yeah, they got some big hits in, but there really wasn't anything that we were overly concerned with.
I feel like they're kinda like the Earth Demons of Frosthaven, right? Like, they have a couple of cards that can do a bit of damage and can be scary, but for the most part, they're just these big, like, meat kind of whacking stick type punching bags.
Well, one of the topics on Gloomhaven Reddit right now is or that I saw yesterday was there was they always put a different topic of the day kind of thing, and everyone talks about it, whether it be a class or whether it be a scenario or an item. And this time it was a monster. It was the Algox Guard, and it was
Oh,
like
yeah.
Dwarf was just like, this is just it's the big sack of numbers ultimately of meat. Just hits hard, lots of health, and just there. That's kind of like the frozen corpses as well, I guess.
Yeah.
And then yeah, we went to the last room. We had an elite steel automation and the E spot, and this was a little bit different because in order to finish the scenario, before we can actually finish it, we had to kill the elite steel automation. And oh, it was like this thing can shield up and just everything. It's got lots of health. How are we gonna deal with this, guys?
I mean, if someone brought a nuke, I like a really small, like, tactical nuke that
Yeah.
we could throw at there that they were prepping for 5 or 6 turns
Mm.
beforehand
Yeah.
and carrying along with them,
Yeah.
and then just throw that at. In fact, maybe they could take inspiration from exactly what they did last time we fought one of these things, and also just deleted it with a small nuke that they prepared for a while.
That's true. How big a nuke are we talking? Was it like a 22 damage nuke?
2 damage nuke, yeah,
I think
something like
so,
that, yeah.
yeah. So our trap has a card that I think he just kind of, without LOS or range or something, spring all the traps and target something within a certain amount of range. And yeah, he threw the 22 damage trap straight into the steel automation and just insta-gibbed it. It
Mhm.
was really nice. It was satisfying for him because he finally got to get that moment where it kind of paid off. Um, and yeah, he just got completely unleashed. I've never seen well, to be fair, I've never seen the trap do what he did. He's normally stuck to doing mazes and trying to control the battlefield. This time he went all out on this scenario, and it was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, it's kind of it's funny because I mean we knew that was coming because we knew the monsters. We didn't know where, but because on Secretariat lists the monsters, or what are we using?
X
Gloomhaven
Haven.
X7. Sorry, it lists the monsters, and you don't know when they're coming up, but you know they'll exist at some point. So he started prepping that from like the second room, and he was kind of combining them and doing a bunch of other stuff. So I guess we kind of didn't see that as a threat. Like I believe when we opened the door and then the monsters all spawned and there was a couple of the Yeti things and bits and pieces. Phil was just like, oh, he just ignored it. He's just like, oh, I don't have to worry about that because Mark's going to kill it.
Mm,
Like, because it had kind of been announced that Mark was going to kill it like 5 turns earlier before
yeah.
it even existed. So yeah, it is good. But I'd say this is probably another scenario that I reckon he's really starting to get the hang of how to make the trap work. Again, kind of being more solo because he doesn't have the meteor and the snowflake to kind of push and move things around.
Yeah.
And even non throwing a 22 damage trap at a monster, he started to really, yeah, get really good at the trap. So it's been
He's
good.
got another card we haven't seen. I think it was the persistent that whatever trap he pulls, he or places, it gets +2 damage to its number already. So because he's obviously throwing a lot of traps, it was just it really spiked him up, and he snowballed a little
Yeah.
bit with the placement and combining all those traps so he could hit that level. Because once he threw that, it wasn't like he was out. He still had like a 7 on the floor. He still had like this and that. And then he had the other card, the one that actually uses the attack modifier deck. So this is something that I had to remember. He's got the one that he can just blow up, and then the other one where he almost picks it up and throws it, but it uses his attack modifier deck. And he also used it on a different steel automation that was in the room that happened to pull, I think, a 6 or a 7 shield. Only to
Yeah.
realize that that 7 damage was just getting eaten and changed his mind. So it's helping me understand the trap as well, as to what it can do. So in future, not maybe boss scenarios. We've got 2 people that apparently can delete them now.
Yep.
But yeah, it's interesting.
Well,
Um,
and that probably comes up in our conversation about boss fights and encounters, right? 50% of our party have the ability to delete like
yes.
bosses and big monsters.
So this was a good scenario to actually calculate the ending and make sure that we could pick up all of the loot.
Yay!
So something we have not done in what feels like months. We emptied the
Oh,
loot deck.
we did. It was gone. No more loot to be had, which
And
means we got both the treasure and our secret squirrel coin item thing that we've been searching for that doesn't exist,
that's
which
right.
happened to be the last card.
The last card. I
The
was
last
actually
card.
so upset with that. And, there's a treasure tile in there as well that allows you to loot 3 cards. So that didn't get that got us
Oh
towards the
yeah.
end, right? It was literally we just calculated we wanted to
Uh,
get all the loot before we finished. And we
mm.
definitely did. We definitely did.
We did as well. The thing that I liked about that is we didn't really have to do that loot scumming thing where we had one monster alive. And I mean, because the scenarios ended when we pushed the thing out, and we could have finished a couple of turns earlier, but we didn't really have to cheese anything. It
No,
was more we did it in good time. It was just really like,
well
okay, well,
planned.
yeah. We didn't have to sit there for 4 turns, kind of mathing out how we're going to collect all the loot and who's going to do what. It just kind of felt like it took a couple of turns to do it, but then we were done. So
And look, Phil was like very close to exhaust. I was very close to exhaust. Mark was very close to exhaust. You had a whole hand of cards. So it was
oh, I
like,
had heaps.
you will
Yep.
be fine. You will push this thing over with your attacks. We'll make it either way.
Yep.
We forgot to use you, Weedy.
Yeah.
Uh,
So sorry. I mean, the good news is we didn't get any new pets, so you're coming along next week as
that's
well,
right. There
right?
was no
So,
one to catch. There was no one to catch in
like,
here. It was so upsetting.
it was I know. I feel like I had, one request, and it was to go to the long grass, and then, Phil just, "No,
I'm,
I'm
w-
seeing selfish."
I'm wondering whether or not, because we haven't looked at what's available apart from the Piranha Pig. We know that because it was the top card. I'm wondering whether or not, because Piranha Pigs are 10. There's 10 of them, which seem maybe they're more of a 10 standees. So there's more of a swarminess to them. Ruin machines are the same. So are they all the lower tier, let's say tier 1, creatures that become pets? Because running around with like an ice wraith, how would they? Well, you don't run around with it, I guess. It's not like it's running around with you and blowing everything up. Oh, okay, maybe that doesn't make sense. But maybe from a thematic point of view, you're picking more the hoardy
Yeah,
kind of creatures. And
that
that's what,
makes
and there
sense.
were none in here. Because even skeletons, like, you get 6 only.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and again, we're not looking at the other monsters, so it's again, it's another cool thing when we go into a scenario, it's like, "Ooh, are there any Pokemon in this one?"
Yeah.
No, they're not. So
Um, okay, so this is the part where we get to the end, we completed the scenario, wonderful. Phil forgot to mention, and probably because he also didn't know, that this is a Force Link scenario.
Ah,
So we kind of didn't realize until the end as I'm reading the rewards. It's like you've unlocked scenario 73, which has got a force link symbol. And then Gaz is like, wait a second. And he checked the pop out windows and he's like, oh. And Gaz has like he's halfway through his next level, but he's still like technically level 3 or something like that.
Yeah, I was level 3. I was 2 XP away from the end of the last scenario where everybody leveled up, which was really annoying, and didn't see this was a force link. So not only am I going again into the next scenario as level 3, well, this one, then I have to go to the next one, and I'm just not happy about it. Although I will say, I really, really enjoyed this scenario. I thought it was great. Okay, I had a lot of fun. I think it was really well designed, and once you've explained the story and the theme and brought me on board with that part, and I think about the fact that I had the invasion at the docks in my top 10, even though I didn't play it, I feel like I'm actually really excited about this next one.
Wow.
This
Okay.
next one's a boss one, right? And this next one has a little boss symbol on the scenario. So we're fighting a boss, which I mean basically just means it will probably be done in 3
Yeah. See,
rounds anyway.
boss fights don't excite me anymore.
But I'm really excited because I think the first 2 scenarios of this PQ have been really cool. Like, the idea, the way they've worked, they've been interesting without being overly complex, although, again, I didn't have to play the first one, so I don't know. But on paper, it seemed great. So I'm actually really excited about how they're gonna make this boss fight, like, really cool,
It's a
like,
good point.
have cool mechanics, and it might be easy. That's I'm not talking about it being difficult because 'cause we've got a blink blade and a trap, so everything's irrelevant. But it's more that I feel like this is gonna be fun.
What could be interesting to
And
look in is the actual designers. They have guest designers. They have people from
mm,
different games and people in the industry designing some of these. I wonder if it's the same person that's designed the PQ scenarios, so that you may see some of that consistency.
mm,
That could be interesting. The information is probably there for me. I just haven't looked, but
yeah, we'll have a look tomorrow. But I think it's gotta be the same person, right? Like, that at least does the PQ chain. It
yeah.
wouldn't be like, "You do this one, you do that one," because then it'd just be like it'd be weird. But yeah, that'd be cool. We cool, have a look. But anyway, I'm now have turned around that I got over the disappointment of not leveling up, and that's done.
Hmm.
I'm now looking forward to seeing the 3rd installment in this PQ chain.
Yeah. Well, we'll win it in 4 rounds, and
Yeah.
then we can be disappointed at that.
Or not, or spend like, 6 hours. Because we're at our next session, we've actually got a lot more time to play because we're all on holidays and stuff. So we're gonna hopefully bang out a couple of scenarios, or at least attempt to do this one 8 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pick your poison, right? Turns out Leroy can't melt the actual ice pillar that we just put onto his ship. So he wants to bring it back to Frosthaven first, which is rather typical. Our rewards for this was 1 tick each, which was nice.
Hmm.
Very nice.
Good reward, which I can't use because we're not going back to Frosthaven.
No. Um, yeah, it's a cool scenario. Do you have any other thoughts on the actual scenario? Have you kind of wrapped
Nah,
it
I
up
think
already?
no, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. I was glad that it wasn't unlimited spawns. It wasn't super challenging, but I think we're kind of at a point now where most of us understand our classes. I mean, this is my 3rd or 4th scenario with the Banner Spear, and I had a great time. I think actually managed to get like heaps of formations off, which was
Mm.
cool. I got to start summoning my little squire dudes, which I've been informed they are known within the circles as oh no, what's that guy's name? The guy who plays Boromir, Sean Bean.
Oh,
So there his name
okay.
should be because he dies in every episode, in every movie. So I managed to summon him
Yeah,
and get to him, and that helped me a couple of times. It's been cool playing around with that. So I actually had a really good time.
nice.
Yeah, I think it was a fun scenario without being overly difficult. But I can see at points how it would be hard depending on your makeup.
Mm. Well,
So
some of those pushes did come down to, like I said, the attack bonafide deck,
mm,
right? Helping you out, and also like you're calculating it. Oh, it's 2. You hit for 2. You pull a +1. Oh wait, fires up, and it's like a few of those moments where I feel we got skillfully lucky. Um,
yeah. Well, if I think about our first party, right? And that's always a good way to think about it. You go if we had the vanilla party, the bone shaper isn't doing much because you can't make the bone horde attack the pillar. So therefore the bone shaper from a movement perspective is out. The Gemini is really going to struggle to do much to it because most of the attacks were low, although it can generate fire, which helps, but some of those were getting really low. So it probably would have been mostly all up to the Drifter.
Mm,
Because even the from memory, and this is we're going back a while now, the Deathwalker didn't do lots of single target damage unless it had shadows up. So he had to consume his resources to do that. So it probably would have been a lot of you moving. I mean, crushing weight would just make it ridiculously easy, right?
yeah.
But
That would be my
but
whole
like
turn, wouldn't it?
that's it. It would be literally like, "What are you doing this turn?" "I'm moving forward 1 and hitting the pillar." Like, that's basically it, right? So but then you'd have everyone else managing that. So again, it's pretty cool to think about the different ways this could play out.
Yeah. No, cool. I've got more run of the mill, the scenario, right? The moving the ice was with the specifics was really cool. And it was great to do a more traditional feeling scenario because I think that's something we haven't had in a while. It's been very kind of bossy, very kind of interesting gimmicks and all that. This one felt a little bit more traditional with a twist,
Yep.
which I did. I enjoyed the fact that Mark got to also. It was more of a playground. Oh well, he's had a lot of playgrounds actually. It's more he got to play a different play style, a very aggressive play style, and he just went all out. How all out? We'll find out shortly. Um, I reckon Ormi, for the first time in a while, lives in this one.
Yeah, maybe. The problem would be like you said, we spawned that ice wraith at the back and it was ranged. I mean, like it and they hit pretty hard. Like they're hitting for 4. So I think yes, there's probably a pretty good chance he lives because we're moving slowly forward. There's just a point where he might be so far behind the spawns come. But who knows? Like we managed that in that last scenario where we knew there was going to be spawns. So
Hmm.
maybe we just played differently and move him up. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. You're right. Like more than we have recently, this one he's
Well,
probably good at.
he hasn't lived in a long time, so it's nice for
Nah,
him to
he's
go, "Can I come to this one, guys?" And
yeah,
it's
yeah. I just feel so bad for everyone who doesn't pull him on a decent scenario because, like, we got him on a good one, right? And we've talked about some of the good ones. There's been so many bad ones, like so many. There's got to be so many groups out there that he just never had a chance. Like, I'd love to hear from that. Like, it's just what are the? It's got to be a thread. Maybe I'll start a thread on the subreddit and just say, hey, just in a word, tell me, did Ormi survive? Right? And like, if not, was it bullshit? Right? Like, did he never have a hope?
yeah. What I wanna know is, like, whether or not it's the card itself where you find Ormi, if it has a different option on the back that said, you don't want him, does he then go back into the deck and you just shuffle him and you get him later? Is that kind of how it works? Or do you just miss out altogether and that's your one shot to make Ormi a
You'd hope that
thing?
he'd come back and annoy you again. Like, hey, I know you said no, but or maybe you do the parent thing and say later.
Yeah,
You can
okay.
come with it later, and it's like, oh, okay, is it later yet? You
Or if
know?
it's the
Or
parent thing, then whatever you say is gold. Like you have to do it the next time.
that's right, but he also ignores you and comes anyway.
Okay.
It's like, oh, you said I could come. It's like, yeah, next. Oh, I'm not getting into this.
No, no, no.
Yeah, yeah.
Community on Scenario 72, lots of rule interpretations about the push pull cards and how it moves, and people thinking of push for equals push for some of those
Okay.
kind of mistakes. And somehow, somewhere, someone managed to flex about their Blink Blade going Nova in Scenario 72, a conversation. Someone just managed to squeeze in there. But my Blink Blade found this really easy and it was great. And I was like, oh,
Wait.
cool.
Okay. Cool.
No one asked, but it was
Are
volunteered.
there, I don't want to say something controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. Are the blink blades like the rogues of WoW?
That's exactly what I'm thinking. That's actually
Yeah,
what I'm
like
thinking.
it's not so much anymore. And for those that played WoW earlier, like vanilla and through the early kind of expansion, so it's kind of this ethos around rogues. There's like World of Roguecraft, which is a super old video, which if you watch is hilarious and goes through how much they just were better than everyone, but the players they attracted, like back when mods weren't you didn't have 85 mods on your thing. The joke was that when you roll a rogue, it automatically installs a DPS meter, right? Because you got to be able to tell people how good you are at the game, right? In numbers. So I'm just wondering if Blink Blades are like that.
I
Like,
think
is that what?
I think anything that can pump numbers up, people are attracted to numbers and people are attracted to damage. It's a tale as
Well, I
old
mean,
as
we create.
time.
We
right?
created a DPS meter for exactly that reason, right?
Exactly, exactly. People like comparing numbers to each other and all of that. And that's been around ever since the internet and online games has come
Yep.
around. And I think when you've got a class that their only job is damage, right? That's their only job. If they don't do that well, they're not doing it right, or it's a feel bad kind of thing. But yeah, no, it's just interesting. I'm looking forward to Blink Blade Watch moving forward with all the other
Yep.
scenarios that we do. I mean, we're doing a boss
Yeah.
one, so maybe we'll contribute.
Yep. That's it.
DPS meters. So let's start from damage. So Gas had 40, which is way different to I think the 8 and the 3 or something you did recently. That's pretty good. Those formations were coming together. Lovely.
Thanks.
I had 60, which is probably the highest I've managed to output on the shackles. Phil had 76 on the Blink Blade.
Mm.
And Mark.
And
Oh yeah, go on.
yeah. Oh, I was gonna say the 76 as well. This is the first scenario I've had that hasn't been a rush.
Mm,
Like, so we were talking about that. We had the boss one, then we had the other one where it was kind of like a boss one, in that like there was the fill timer, and so like he was pumping out 70 odd damage in 5 rounds. Whereas
mm.
at this one, I don't know how many rounds this one went to, but it would have been at least 10, uh, thereabouts. So it's yeah, really interesting to see that because I feel like he did do really well, but I'm not sure. Maybe a lot of it got absorbed by shields. I'm not sure.
No, I think he did a lot good. It was just it was like if we remove Mark's 22, it might be seen as a little bit more of a thing, only because he did 76 damage over the whole scenario with a lot of different mobs. There was not one big one that had to go down except for the steel automation, which
That's
Mark
true.
took care of. So I guess psychologically, he's doing his role kind of like his Deathwalker in a way. If there was an objective or destroy this thing or something like that, we'd probably see it a little bit more. But I think this was very run of the mill.
Mm.
Run of the
It's good
fill.
effort. Don't let me downplay, like, 70 odd damage is
Oh,
great,
yeah.
but I think you're right, he's probably overkilling everything and then not being able to just go, "Oh, well, I'm just gonna do 5 attacks into this one thing because I know that I can,"
Mm.
and then just yeah, and you're right, like, pump up those numbers, so yeah.
Mark had
Sorry.
82. 82 damage on the trap, which is just ridiculous. I mean, obviously, even if you take away the 22, that's crazy for Mark. That's crazy for what we've seen the trap to. And we only have our own experiences to go with and the players that are playing these classes. So in our own little ecosystem, we're very proud of him. Like it's cool to see the
Mm,
transformation from early days. I think he was always saying he was enjoying it or he was adjusting to the play style of it and all of that. I think this was the first scenario, even though he's had the maze ones where he really had a fun time. Like he had a
yeah.
real blast. Lol. So
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It is really cool, and you're right, like, he's been saying he's been enjoying it the whole time. I didn't believe him,
no
but,
one
like
believed him.
no, I believed him. But it's interesting because his experience looked like he was still either figuring it out or not. Like we talked about this a lot, the real estate and how he had to play. Like he couldn't do what he's doing now, like 5, 10 scenarios ago because there was just crap everywhere.
Yeah.
Like even as the crab where I can place water, I spent the first 10, oh, not 10, but maybe 5, 6 scenarios as the crab not using water because I'm like, there's nowhere to put it. Right? Like I tried, but I couldn't. So it's probably opened up a bit that way. But he's definitely learning a lot more of the flow. And it's interesting because there's some people in our Discord. I've seen some people in the Frosthaven Discord and on Reddit talk about their experience with the trap and how much it just like slaps. Right? They were like, "I, it's probably one of my favorite. I did heaps of damage. It was really cool. I could control the battle." And I think we're starting to see those numbers come up now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is cool to kind of see him take over a little bit because he's the highest level character, I think.
Yeah, that's an important part as well. Is that with a lot of the classes, Geminate and just I would say all of them to an extent, your real kind of spike next bit is around the tier 5, tier 6 cards when you get them, where things really open up and you really get to carve a niche into your build and feel more impactful. Right, level 2 and level 3 sometimes it's your piecing, you get a feel for it, etc. I mean, I'm looking forward to when I hit 6 and 7. Right. Um,
I'm looking out forward to when I hit 4.
yeah, well, we had a sneak peek at your 4 card because we can't choose it right now. And what is it, a
Yep, that's
bird?
right. Oh, yeah, don't worry. I spoke to Dwarf about this, I'm gonna put a complaint directly in with Isaac. But
Okay.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So yeah, no, you're right. It is that level 5, level 6 card to see how it unlocks the like further potential of the classes, and yeah, it definitely seems like he's starting to get to that place.
Mhm. Damage taken, Gaz took the most at 27. He definitely did at the start anyway. Phil took 23, I took 12, and Mark took 7. Healing, Mark healed for 6, Phil healed for 12, Gaz healed for 27, and I healed for 39.
How much of that 39 was self
Oh,
heals?
all of it. I don't think I healed anyone else. that's that's what we do. It's great. It's just like, yeah, I'm gonna heal myself for 10 this round.
It's
Um,
just hilarious that you've got moved on to a class that's not a healer, not a support, and then you are absolutely smashing the heal numbers. And it's because you're like, yeah, and I heal 6, and I heal 10,
yeah,
I heal 8. Like every other turn, you're like, nope, I'll just, can I top my life up, please?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
lovely. Outpost phase. What outpost phase? It's a force link. We don't do them anymore. Silly, silly,
Rip.
silly. That wraps up scenario 72 on.
Battle goals.
Oh God, yes. Where did that go on my
Only because
notes?
only
Oh, there
because
it
I got
is.
mine. Yeah, yeah.
All right. So we had.
I like this little mini game. It's like you call them out and I try to remember who had what based on how they played.
I'm trying to work out it. Oh, no, this must be right. All right. Someone had Wastrel again. I think we saw this recently. Lose a card to negate 2 or less damage from an attack. I know my Snowflake had it, and then I went back into the deck.
Okay.
Who had Wastrel? I think it might have been
I don't
Mark.
know.
I think it was Mark. I
Yeah,
th-
okay.
uh,
But he just never took the damage.
no, it was not something. Maybe he claimed he probably could have done it earlier, but towards the end he just wasn't really taking it. Scrambler, never long rest. I think it might have been Phil.
Phil. Yeah.
I think he got that. So I think Wastrel, I don't know if we got that or not. Workhorse, gain 13 or more experience before any bonus scenario experience. That was mine, and we did get that. On that note, how much experience did you and I pull? We pulled stupid numbers on that.
Yeah. Well, I think I ended up on 17, which
Yeah.
again, I think is just purely on the formations because every formation gives you an XP,
You would
right?
want some
So,
kind of reward for trying to pull off a
well,
formation, right?
yeah, but it's cool. Like I think it feels really good because it's an extra reward for trying to coordinate all that stuff and playing things in the right order. So yeah, it was good.
Do you know what yours was?
Yeah, it was never kill anything ever.
Yeah. Did you get that?
Yeah. Yeah,
Ah.
100% I did. There was times where I was just like, "I'm gonna hit the other thing that's on full life." Like, there was time I think there was 2 skeletons next to me and Mark, and one of them went down to, like, 1 HP, and the other one and I could have done some pretty cool things with my cards. I was like, so I'm gonna jump over the other side of the room, and just leave those to someone. Phil, can you handle them?"
This
And I
this
think you killed them.
this might have been the bit where I'm like, okay, I need to know what everyone's doing so that I know what. Do you want me to blow those two things up? And if you were just like, yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
do that because 'cause I'm not. So, yeah, there was other times where I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. I can jump forward, I can skewer through, and I can hit these 2. That's gonna be really cool because there's a dude here." Like, because 'cause I'm starting to see, like, the matrix as it is, like, the formations and where everyone is, and I'm also remembering to ask people if they're staying where they are because sometimes Mark will be in a spot, I'm like, "Great, cool, I'll plan it," and I think early on, he was gonna move, I'm like, "I need to tell you where I need you." So,
Yeah.
yeah, cool, game is hard, but, no, there were times that I was and then Phil booked this one thing and put it down to 1 health. That's was like, can I do that and not hit it?" And you're
Yeah.
like, "No." It's like, "Oh, okay. I guess I move over to the side and don't do anything." So, yeah, it was interesting.
Well,
But the thing is, I'm trying to I had this rule. I'll stick to the 1 tickers because I find that you go for 2 ticks, you fail it, then the next week you go for 1 tick and you get it, and you end up either behind or basically breaking even, right?
yeah,
Because it might take you a couple of weeks to do a 2 ticker and then you're missing it. So it just ends up easier just to do the 1 tickers that are easy.
yeah.
This one was that out of the ones I picked, it was best. We did it, got 2, got 1 for the scenario effect. I'm like, "Oh, this is great. Perfect. I'm gonna level up. That's 2 perks. I get to level up." Oh, you don't get to go to Frosthaven.
No, and funnily enough, we
You
knew this from the start. We just didn't know it.
we did. So, yeah. Anyway,
All right, take it away.
cool. So, I don't know where this came from. It might have just been part of the conversation in Discord, and someone mentioned boss fights and whatnot, and it just popped into my head about like having a chat as to what makes a good like boss battle or encounter. So, I started thinking about it. I did a little bit of research on it because we could talk about it specifically in Frosthaven, which I mean is probably going to be the crux of what examples we use. But I feel like boss battles and boss encounters are something through most genres. Uh, there's a lot of focus that goes into them, right? Because some of them can be lackluster, and it's only because we've had a couple in our Frosthaven campaign that have felt a bit meh and not bad. Like you don't go, "Oh, that was a really bad scenario." It's more just like, eh, like that was didn't feel like a boss battle, and kind of where that kind of I guess parallels drawn is that there's video games, there's other RPGs, there's other board games, I guess, from that sense where you can kind of pull inspiration from. And it's trying to work out where Frosthaven lands in that because it's very different, and I'll go through that in a bit. But like as you will, if you saw the our top 10 best and top 10 worst, there was a couple of the made it into both, right? So the kind of the evidence from our experience so far is that some of them have been really like spot on, like
Mm.
really cool scenarios, and some of them are just again not bad, but just felt not great in that sense. So while I started going through it all and I started like writing stuff and I'm like, oh, this could go forever. So I'm gonna try to keep it really brief and kind of just really hit a couple of main pieces that I think relate to Frosthaven.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, if anyone wants to pick up the conversation, I'd love to talk about this more because I think there's heaps of stuff to talk about it, especially as it expands outside of Frosthaven. So I guess where to start is there was two main kind of key areas that I felt like the boss fight, the boss encounter type thing falls into that really highlight. It can make it good or make it shit, right? The first one is like the theme, right? So it's the flavor of the fight, what happens in there, and I'll break this down to more detail in a minute. And then the other one is really just how the fight works. So I think again, when you go into video games, especially, there is like way more, and this is kind of where I think it'd be really interesting conversation to have if we had time. But so when you're looking at a dungeon crawl like this, or even RPG equivalent,
Yeah.
I feel like it probably boils down to those two key things. So I guess to start with, the thematics of the fight, right? So the thing I was thinking about is like when you go into a boss fight, like why are you there, right? Like what's the story? Does anybody actually care that we're here killing this thing? Or is it just like a roadblock on the way to more loot? That mini boss type thing of like, oh, you got here, now fight this big bad guy. And you're like, oh, okay, I don't why? Like, why do we have to kill him? I don't know, just do it. All right, cool, then you move on. And like overall, once you do it, what's the payout? What's the consequence for doing that?
Mm.
And again, we'll talk about the couple of the examples from Frosthaven, but like for you, I guess if you're thinking about boss fights and the theme of it, call, like what do you want to see and what draws you in when you're kind of fighting a boss?
Um. So, and this is where everything gets very individual, right? Because that's why it's a good topic actually, because everyone looks at things differently. I am not very good at following a lot of stories unless a story of a game or um just the way it's written and the I don't know dialogue and all that kind of stuff. If it's really captivating me, then I'm invested. And then more emphasis goes on to whether or not it was performed well, like just the layout of the boss, that epic encounter versus what's my daily and quest this week? I need to go and deal with that, and kill that for loot purposes. Um, I I think it would, yeah, it'll come down to a little bit more of what the game is and
Mm,
how invested into the game I am. Because I play a range of games, and I guess two of the main ones that I play at the moment are Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, which are gacha games on PC and mobile. And their story is amazing, and I love the story of both games. And then you get to a boss at the end of one of the patches, and it's epic, and I love it. The cutscenes and everything is amazing, and you kill the boss, and
mm,
I love all of that. Right, the challenge isn't always there, but they build it up so well from a story and an animation point of view that you're just happy to watch it, almost like a movie. And then it goes on farm because they drop resources that you use to basically level up your characters and all that kind of stuff. And that's when I totally don't care at all, right?
yeah.
But this is something I guess they can get kind of away with video games. So yeah, and then there are other games like some of the scenarios that we've done where I don't care as much, but it was good.
Yeah.
And I'll go into that if you wanted to go down that path a little bit later on. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. They kind of all tie out. And I think the examples you gave for say those gacha games where you go forward. I think the other ones that came to mind that a lot of people can probably like relate to is WoW,
Mhm.
like WoW bosses.
Mhm.
Some of them you didn't know why you were fighting it or what it was there for. Others were really pivotal for, say, I mean, we're talking probably some of the raids, like really pivotal fights in the raid. It doesn't have to be the last boss.
No.
And sometimes that, I guess it's a mash of things, mechanics, but sometimes the reason why you're there and how it ties into the whole thing is another kind of tick for the boss fight. Makes it
Mm.
more interesting. And so, what I wanted to do is run through, use a couple of examples that we gave that we quite liked and disliked from Frosthaven, and
Yeah.
just see how they matched up as we went along. Right.
Yeah.
So, I guess thinking about the thematics of the fight, one of the ones we didn't like was is it Heart of Ice?
Yeah.
Change of Heart.
Change your heart. Yeah.
Change of Heart.
55.
Yeah. Now, from a storyline, this is the end of the Elgox quest, right?
Yeah.
It can't get any more epic,
No.
right? Like this is the thing we've been working out from basically from scenario 2.
One of the ends, but yeah.
One of the ends, correct.
Yeah.
Maybe the others are more epic, who knows, right?
Yeah.
But you can't go, oh, the alternate like a storyline is better than the one you chose. But that's the thing, right? So I think it had everything there it needed to in order to be epic. So that's kind of a tick. But again, this is one that we rated low. Meanwhile, the tree one, what was the tree?
Raven's Roost.
Raven's Roost. I don't know why we were fighting a tree, right? Like I'm sure if we went back into it, we could figure it out. But we like that one,
Yeah.
right? So it's interesting because it's not any one of these things. It's all going to make a difference. And kind of what leads into the other half of the theme that I think is really important, which then is probably the reason why one of these was rated higher, was the arena of the battle. Right now, I put this kind of in the theme because I feel like the arena, while mechanically it can affect, and we'll talk about mechanics in a bit, with like how the fight works, what does the boss do, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like the arena sets so much of the tone of the fight and creates so much interest.
Mm.
So, like it's the theme of like, or the arena being like, where are you fighting now? Is it like a 10 by 10 empty room, right? Like you just go, oh, there's a boss in the middle, go fight him. You know, are there environmental hazards? The monsters, are they thematic to it? Do they change the way that you look at the boss? You know, like if we, in whatever scenario it was that we fought the at the end of your never ending story PQ, that monster that had some of the like had the chaos demons. We kept having these chaos demons, so it kind of felt like it was the next part of that because we had to keep fighting those things.
Yeah.
You know, and it like this probably more translates to video games than anything. Although I feel it translated really well into the Raven's Roost one. Grand icons or centerpieces for the boss, right? Like these things that are there that you go, it's kind of drawing you towards that part.
Yeah.
And I guess if I contrast them, Raven's Roost, we had to go kill a tree,
Yeah.
right? Really liked that one. There was heaps of cool stuff there. Change of Heart, we had to go kill a block of ice. I just wail on that thing. Right click the big block of ice, and then we win, and we didn't find. So again, they've got these big centerpieces,
They're
but
doing it. Yeah.
yeah. So it's interesting to understand why. So I guess for you, right, and think about again the games you've played and the other things. What are some of the memorable ones that come to mind for you, and like why the arenas?
Well, I will use just quickly scenario 21 as a good segue into this particular thing because scenario 21 was a boss as well. Like Raven's Roost is not a boss, but the objective made it feel like a boss, right? So it's
Oh, is it not a
categorizing.
boss?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it was a boss
What about the
scenario.
boss?
Oh,
Okay.
maybe. Oh shit. Oh, see, maybe it is. I don't know. Yeah. So it might have been.
Correct us if we're right or wrong.
No. It's fine. Scenario 21, the arena almost felt like the whole scenario because you didn't know where he was. He was taunting you the whole time. That's a perfect example of the thing you were mentioning where there's no story, there's no background story as to why we're here, at least not that I remember. I just know we ended up at this place. This guy was taunting us. We had to clear room after room after room before we finally got to him. And yes, it then became a bit more of a traditional boss fight, although he had a very interesting play style. But we were all burnt out. We were all bashed up from just everything we had endured that whole time. It made it interesting because we didn't know by the time we got to him what our condition was going to be in, right? When you get to that. A lot of my boss, I guess, arena memories mostly come from World of Warcraft, and I've spent a lot of that time with you and Mark, and doing all that, where you get your big group of friends and you do an actual raid fighting a big, formidable enemy who's usually overpowered and actually requires the whole team to work together to overcome the many obstacles and challenges that get thrown at you. And then sometimes you get additional mobs. that make things interesting, especially if you ignore them, right? You can't just burn down the boss because these things, the longer they're up, the harder it's just going to be, more strain on the healers. And maybe, for everyone that's up, the boss gets buffs and all that kind of stuff. So many things to look at. For an example, I'm going to go with something like Kel'Thuzad from World of Warcraft, right? Shadowlands. It's a classic example of a really, really cool looking arena, right? Where you actually had some of the things that you had to destroy that would pop up and everyone had to split off and take care of all that kind of stuff while fighting the actual main boss. And I alluded to this particular scenario because to this boss fight in scenario 38, The Way Forward, right? Which was my favorite scenario because it reminds me of this, because halfway through the fight, a portal opens up to a separate part of the arena. This is the Kel'Thuzad one. And you have to send pre-organized a small strike team to go in there with a healer to deal with bullet storm mechanics while they burn down an objective, while the rest of the raid is dealing with the boss. And if the strike team doesn't accomplish it, it leads to a raid wipe. But it was like that was the setting of something that really stuck to me as a really cool kind of arena style fight, ultimately. Another example is like in WoW. There's a few from WoW, but they are the epitome of, in my head, along with maybe the From Software series with Elden Ring and Dark Souls and all that, right? They had a Deathwing fight in Cataclysm where the raid is actually on the back of the dragon and he's flying. And Deathwing itself is trying to get these scales displaced and damage off his back while mobs are all fighting, etc. All the whilst there's a mechanic of where all your characters are situated on his back. If there's more on one side than the other, he then will turn to the point where he'll actually flip over. So you've got to move on to the other side of his back to balance him out. And it would come up with a message. Deathwing can feel something on his right, meaning if you don't change this up, it's going to flip. And if he flips, anyone on that right side dies, right? Which is just insane. And that's just an added thematic arena mechanism to killing a boss, ultimately.
And it's interesting because that segues perfectly into the other half of the conversation, or the other point that I want to talk, which was around the boss fights and the mechanics, right? So it's one thing to have the setting and to know why you're there, but then it's how those settings interact. So you got Kel'Thuzad summoning the portal and going to the other world. You got the Deathwing kind of flipping over, and you're fighting on the back of a dragon. It's interesting you bring up like Elden Ring and those type of games, because I feel like those, which are really well regarded, and the boss fights are particularly are known for just being brutal. They're all super heavy mechanics, right? Like it's all about learning the mechanics. But they don't just put a boring arena, boring boss fight, then just learn which times to dodge. They also flesh out the whole space and they use it. So I think it does kind of like link with the mechanics, is that you can put a good theme in regards to why you're there and why you're fighting and where you're fighting. But then if it's lackluster, it's just like a tank and spank, right? Just right click this thing till it's dead.
Yeah.
Then all that just dies away.
Yeah.
And I think an example of that for Frosthaven was the end of your PQ, the one where we had to kill the boss,
Tormentor.
Chaos Demon. Yeah, the Tormentor. Like that was a not a very interesting arena. That was here's boss, here's you stuff from my perspective. Anyway, here's the boss, here's where you start. Go kill him, and then we're gonna spawn heaps of guys.
Yeah.
Like it was an arena, but it was very, very boring. And I mean, we had a trap that trivialized a lot of that. So it's not so much the difficulty, so much as that there wasn't any interesting situations. There was no change of how the fight works or things that were going on. So that's another example within Frosthaven that you kind of didn't really do that. So yeah, it's an interesting thing where you're fighting, I think, but kind of how the mechanics work.
It's hard because like a lot of this stuff, unfortunately, doesn't translate well into the board game world, or it's hard to translate well a lot of these mechanics that you can. And I think a lot of designers are doing a really cool job of bringing in some of these mechanics thematically, I guess, and mechanically as accurately as they can to make it interesting without bogging it down with a million rules. And that's something that's really hard to do. Like you say with like Dark Souls and all of that kind of stuff, right? Dark Souls is a traditionally really hard game, and the whole From Software series is known for being really, really hard. I actually put up a Dark Souls video, kind of just talking about Dark Souls, the board game, and kind of how they went, and how the idea of repeating something over and over again, which is what WoW does and which is what Dark Souls does, you're repeating it over and over again and learning from your failures doesn't translate well into board games, because no one wants to sit there bashing their head against a cardboard puzzle. It just doesn't work. There will be groups out there that will grind it. And mate, if I was like 16 years old and home for the holidays, I could sit there and bash my head set against a bit of cardboard because that's all I could afford. But you'd make that happen, right? Whereas time is now precious. You're happy. It's weird. You're happy to do it in a video game. You're not happy to do it when you're collectively with your group, running scenario 21 like 15 times in a row before we finally get it. It
Yeah.
just doesn't work. So that makes it
Yeah, and
harder, right? Makes it
it
so much
does.
harder to make it interesting.
It definitely does, and I think you raise a really good point, and I probably should have said this at the start. I'm not shitting on who created, designed these scenarios at all. It's more of a discussion about like it's easy to say, "Oh, that felt good, that felt bad," and then just kind of that be the end of it. But it's kind of understanding why. And actually, one of the points which I wasn't going to go into, but since you brought it up, we'll kind of flesh out a little bit is the difficulty in a game like Frosthaven to make these things work. Now, again, I spent some time doing a bit of research and having a think about this, so I wasn't just going to fire from a hip, like I normally do with my opinions. But a couple of things that I thought of that make that really hard is they have no idea about the power level of the characters fighting. They don't know who the characters are.
True.
You don't even know how many players you got, right? Like it can be two or it could be four, like or two or three or four. So it would be so hard from a design perspective to do something like you do in these like big epic boss fights we know in these video games and kind of other similar genres because you don't know who's going.
No.
Like, you go, oh well, I'm gonna make this awesome fight where all these monsters come out and it changes everything, and you're like, oh, they've got the trap, so that doesn't matter. Now, I feel like they probably just need to then cater to the general idea, and I'm assuming that's what they've done, right? They have considered the classes that would be involved, but I mean that just makes it so hard to do. And so there's a like the balance would be ridiculously tricky to do, but also a lot of the tropes or a lot of the kind of objectives that come out of these boss fights, which uh, if you go into the design kind of side of things, which I started to dig through, there's no way of testing the party. Like you talk about your like repeating Dark Souls or Elden Ring fights or even WoW, like Mythic Raids, you do them 100 times, right? Like before you get them right, and it's all learning the mechanics and testing everyone's ability. They there's no way of doing that. Like you don't want to create a boss that you go, okay, learn the things that you've kind of your classes and et cetera, et cetera. Now you're going to have to do this 10 times to learn each step of the way because people will just throw it out.
Mm.
Right. So it's a really big challenge and it's a good kind of piece to put here that I'm not saying I know how to do it better. It's just understanding the makeup of what's made some of the fights interesting versus some of the fights are not interesting.
And one of the main things that I think we need to remember is that we have seen maybe 3 or 4 of these in this game. And there are a lot of standees. Now, a lot of the bosses that are coming in there, sometimes it's like use the Chaos Demon standee. There are unique standees in there. We've only fought one, if you're not counting the snowflake and the ice fist, right? And it was the Frost Prince, and I've binned him like he's in a little box because we don't need him anymore. But there's a
Yep.
whole bunch of other unique ones that are just there, and I'm not looking through them. There's a bit of a stack, but it could have been something as simple as, I hope the amDirt guys don't go down this exact path that they're going on right now because this is going to be all their experiences with the boss fights, right? When we've got all these epic ones in store. And this is at the amDirt curse right now, is that this boss fight's about to be bloody amazing, right? Because we
Yeah.
just start crapping on something and then they just show up, right?
Well, that's why I think it was good timing because I'm really interested, and I think
We're just
you're
hyping it
telling.
up.
Yeah, like I'm really excited about this next boss fight because again, like it's been two interesting scenarios that have led to where we're going, and I know the story now, but I'm not super invested as to why we're there. But the whole piece seems interesting. We've just put this piece of ice on this boat. I assume it's going to be a fight on the boat, right? Like it's going to be an ambush or a fight on the way back with this piece of ice. Because
That's a
if not, we
great
would.
point. I didn't think of that. That's why it's force
Yeah,
lanes.
yeah, exactly. Because we're otherwise we'd
Oh.
just be back in Frosthaven, right? So it's got to be something about transporting this piece of ice. So again, I'm really interested to see what they do. And look, that kind of we've talked about this for a bit, and I didn't want to go on about this forever, but the mechanics of the fight are probably that big piece that gets noticed. Like it's the most obvious part of a boss fight, but I think it's the one. The others are important, but it's the one that can kind of make it fun or not. So like it's more did the boss do or did the scenario effects do something that made it more fun, right? or did they do something that made it not fun? Okay, and that's like making you miss a turn all the time or making everything difficult terrain. It's like if unless there's a puzzle to solve, if it's just something that shits on you, like, aha, now you get to this point and the game just becomes dumb,
Mm,
then that's not fun. That's just going like take longer to do what you want to accomplish.
yep.
Uh, and that's kind of like when we think about a change of heart, the scenario, having the big ice speaker dude run around or the big whatever the fist guy run around, it wasn't really fun. Like, I know he wasn't the boss, but that was a boss scenario. Like, the ice thing was the boss. Him and the monsters didn't do anything interesting to make it fun. The mechanics of that one were everything takes less damage.
Yeah.
So just do whatever you're going to do normally, but it's going to take slightly longer. That's not fun, right? And so, where is it? There are other ones that like the tree, and again, assuming that Raven's Roost is actual boss fight, hitting it had retaliate. Now, while that is just take more damage, essentially, it did mean you had to strategize because I think Phil walked up and booked it with like 3 hits, 3 little baby hits, and he just wrecked himself.
Yeah.
This is again way back then. He didn't know what retaliate was either, so things are still the same. But that kind of thing meant there was a puzzle to it because you couldn't just go, "Oh, I'm just going to blow all my cards and kill it,"
No.
because you had to consider how that went back.
True.
So I think that's probably the from the mechanics piece. Like, do they make it fun? Do they make it harder? Do they make it easier? And then does it surprise players?
Mm.
Right? Does something happen that make you go, "Oh wow, it's all just changed"?
That's probably my
Um,
biggest thing that I really like about boss fights and would like to see more games like Dark Souls, even the board game, right? Monster Hunter, which I've been playing a little bit with Calvin at the moment, and Warcraft. Most games these days incorporate phases in bosses. So there's always a phase one, phase two, maybe even a phase three, where the mechanics do shift. And I think
mm,
that's what adds to the excitement of it. I think if they incorporated that a little bit more into what we're doing now, even if it was a better, like if it was in the section book, like, when the boss hits half health, go to this section. And then you're like, oh crap, what's happening next? And then it's a different mechanic, whether he goes immune and leaves, spawns a bunch of dudes, or there's a pillar at the moment that makes him immune, but you have to deal with that. But now everyone could only move one space instead of, little things like that that just add to the second phase of the actual fight. And I know people sometimes get sad when they get blindsided by not knowing mechanics beforehand because, if it's a surprise. But I think that's just another, I guess, layer of the puzzle. Like
mm,
Frosthaven's essentially a puzzle kind of game, and you work with the pieces that you choose and the ordering and the timing, and the surprise second phase is just unveiling more puzzle. And you got to MacGyver through the next mechanics as well. And I love a good
yeah.
surprise.
Well, and that's what made the Ice Prince, the Snow Prince,
Mm,
Ice Prince, so memorable was that every room was really different. And I remember the first playthrough of that was like, whoa, wow, like didn't expect that. We opened a room, it was full of bookshelves. We have to
yeah,
kill the bookshelves. Like that was really cool. Like that whole scenario was cool. And then our second playthrough, because we failed the first time, was then figuring out the puzzle. So we kind of got to experience new cool things as they were like, holy shit, what happened there? And then the next playthrough was like, okay, now we know it. Let's figure out the puzzle.
yeah,
So they didn't make them ridiculously hard in the case that, okay, you need to do this 10 times before you figure it out. But knowing what's coming meant we had a different experience. And it was also positive because we did it. So it was kind of that, oh, wow, that I didn't expect that. And then the next one was like, oh, yes, like kind of cool rush of like, I just solved a puzzle.
yeah.
So one scenario got us to feel two completely different things. And we had to play it twice.
That's
So,
right. But don't don't
that's
and don't make it a burn job, right? DPS races can be fun if they're done correctly, but they're really hard to fine tune because of everything you said earlier: party makeup, experience of players, levels, items, and all that kind of stuff. I think if you just make a cookie cutter, and it's probably the NMIPQ that was probably the one that hurt the most because you were literally starting in the room with the boss. He's right there. You know where the spawns are going to be. You know what his cards are. His special one and two are. Um, Fight, right? That was
Yeah,
it.
that's it. Well, we had perfect information. Like, other
Yes.
than what the monsters were drawing, right? There was nothing else was gonna change, and that's the part. Now, it's interesting because 'cause I'll go on a slight side track tangent just as an example, and then kind of we'll wrap this up. But one of the pieces that come up that's another genre we haven't talked about is, say, role-playing games. So, like, Dungeons& and Dragons for the main example, but, most of the others would factor this in. Boss fights in those can be hard because it can end up being just a lot of doing nothing, right? Like put really big tanky monster in, and then everybody just do all their that you either pump it and you spend and blow all your cooldowns and kill it, or it ends up in being this kind of like, oh, just go around and just roll and just hopefully you do enough damage till it's dead. I remember reading, and that's I'm not saying that's how you do it, but that's kind of the bad version of a boss fight in RPGs. There was a designer I was listening to a podcast from ages ago who was talking about designing like D&D scenarios and stuff like that and encounters. And one of the things he said is like where possible, try to make sure something changes every turn or every round. So it's not just here is the map, you can now math it all out, just go kill everything. It's like add things, whether it be terrain or things coming in or extra hazards or a bonus even, right? Like different things you can add in to make people go, oh, I didn't expect that. And now I have to deal with something else or consider something else,
Yes.
right? You don't want them all to be hurdles because then that gets boring. But one of the things exactly what you're talking about in the boss fight at the end of your PQ was nothing changed.
No.
Like, that it could change based on what he drew because he was
Gross.
creating the difficult terrain, the icy terrain, so it changed the puzzle slightly, but nothing happened, and it would have been really cool to say at half health, go, all right, you all get teleported to this other board, right? Like that would have been like, oh, whoa, that's really cool. Okay, now we're in this other world, and maybe now we're just like a one-on-one with him for some reason, but there's other things going on. Like stuff like that could have been done. And I'm not saying it would be in better or worse because you could do that and it could be worse. But they're the kind of things that make you go, oh, wow, I had planned. And now I got to this point with this thing that I didn't know was going to happen. And
Mm.
that changes it. It just changes the mechanics a bit to have a different thing to do.
I'll give
So,
the designers of these things a lot of credit. There's no perfect world where they can get this right, and no amount of suggestions in the world for us will ever, or anyone will get it right. It's going to be either a situation where that happens, right? That we portal to another room, etc. But then the mechanics are completely different. That throws us off completely, and even the cards we have in the puzzle and all that kind of stuff, and it leads to a
mm,
wipe, and that's going to piss everyone off, right?
yeah.
It's going to piss absolutely everyone off, especially if they have to go back and do it again. But if it's too easy, and we find it a bit meh because we burned him down too quickly because we had a blink blade flexing, etc. And then we're like, oh yeah, it was kind of like you can't please everyone, and I think that's just it's just something we have to. I'm trying to remember that these guys are trying to come up with these kind of things, and it's hard to nail it every time. It could be a timing thing with the party makeup and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's I'm not giving
And
I don't want to give them a hard time and make them think
no,
oh
no, and that's why I said that earlier. I was
yeah,
like, I'm not hitting on them for creating bad scenarios. It's like it's more talking about in general, right? Like
yeah,
what makes a good or bad boss fight.
yeah.
Because I think a lot of the time it just gets thrown around as like, oh, that was crap,
Yeah.
right? End of story. That was too easy, right? And you go, oh, okay. And I've kind of pulled this out a little bit from playtesting things. Is you go, well, was it too easy just because you RNG'd your way through it, or was it too hard because you RNG'd yourself out of it?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's not how that you can't that's not the experience of the scenario, right? And imagine that when they play tested this, if they had, a couple of dozen people all playing different characters, all doing different things, they would have gauged it and got something out of that. So we probably maybe landed on the slightly less fun, not the hard, but just because it wasn't all that interesting.
Mm.
That doesn't mean it was bad,
No.
right? And it filled its purpose. I mean, this was the never ending story. The rest of the scenarios had pretty much done all that interesting stuff. So and look, that's probably the last like third category I didn't talk about, which we won't talk about at all. I just want to put it out there. Is it memorable, right? Does the scenario allow cool shit to happen, right? And sometimes you can fabricate that. Like I know from the time I've spent DMing games and even playing some games with my kids, it's like I find that the role is to make it feel if everyone have fun, and if you can think of a mechanic, or if you can think of a setting, or if you can think of a storyline that's going to make people go like, "Oh, that was memorable for X reason," then you should put it in there,
Yeah.
right? And that's probably the last part. Like, what are you walking away from with the boss fight?
Yeah.
And that's a variable because you can't always do that.
No.
But I think that's the thing that's gonna to make it feel like a Kel'Thuzad or something like that, where you go still talking about it X amount of patches later or years
100%.
later.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, that's it. I think we've probably gone on longer than we wanted to anyway. So sorry about that.
No,
But
it's not
I,
doing too bad.
it was really interesting doing that research, and there was a lot of other stuff that I kinda come up with, so, yeah, if anyone wants to harass me on the Discord, I'm more than happy to vomit text onto them.
Yep. Can I talk about very, very briefly some boss fights that I really like?
Yeah, 100%.
Alright, Margit from Elden Ring, the very first real challenge. The amount of times I smashed my head against that, I thought it was so cool. The voices, the second phase, the crying over and over again, and having Calvin come in and be like, "Did you beat it yet?" I'm like, "No." Oh my god, I love
Is
that
that the
so
first
much.
boss?
Yeah, the first big
Yeah,
one.
yeah. Yes, yeah, so I only ever got through 2 of those bosses, and then but yeah, so I did manage to do that. It was
Yeah,
cool.
and it was like the best feeling in the world when you finally beat it, right? It was amazing.
Yeah.
God of War's Zeus from God of War 3, love that. Belial, this one still haunts me. Belial is the Act 2 boss from Diablo 3. We used to play
Mm.
hardcore. This guy would one-shot you. The whole boss was literally running around a platform, a very small platform, mind you, while little explosions, things are about to pop under you. And one step in the wrong direction, and boom, hardcore character gone. Remake. And Mark and I died so much on this boss that even if I play Diablo 3 right now and went to this boss, or I think is tuned slightly different, I still get panic attacks when I play against this boss. All right. Opera from Karazhan is a raid that happened forever ago, and it was one that when you talk to an NPC, it changed the raid from 3 different types, from Little Red Riding Hood to do you remember
That
this?
one, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
to
that
the
was
Wizard
cool,
of
yeah.
Oz and all that, and you didn't know which one you were gonna get for any given week. That was super memorable just because it was so much fun. And finally, Shao Kahn from Mortal Kombat 2. What a stupid boss. This guy just kicks the shit out of you over and over again. Just as a 12-year-old kid, he's angry all the time. These fights had amazing soundtracks, and something I feel Frosthaven is lacking because there should be like a sound that just comes from the board when you enter the boss room, and this music starts getting pumped up, like Final Fantasy music or something, you know.
I
Uh,
mean, jokes aside, like, I think that, um moving forward in the Haven series and how they go, like they're adding in all these supplementary things. It's probably not out of the realm of possibility to either they're probably not going to do it themselves, but I mean we've got these apps now and the Fortella and stuff. Like I'm sure someone can put together a Spotify kind of playlist and say this is your playlist. These are your particular tracks for these particular scenarios. Like it would be doable. I reckon someone could do it and they'd market it, right?
yeah, they
Like
could.
tell me you wouldn't buy the, Frosthaven, soundtrack pack if someone was like, "Hey, I've made one."
Yeah, 100%. It's like those old books that you had as a kid that came with a little cassette, and then you know you get to the end and it plays a sound, and you have to take it out and turn it around to the B side.
Yeah, that's it,
They
that's
should just
it.
add that into every
Yeah,
Frosthaven pack. People still have
that's it.
like Walkmans or something, right?
Yeah, that's right, so yeah, cool. Anyway,
Nice.
sounds good.
Well, we will wrap it up there. From the amDirt crew, we wish all of our listeners a very Merry Christmas. May you spend it with friends, family, and loved ones. Thank you for supporting us. It's the best gift Gaz and I could have. May your holidays be safe and memorable as we bring in 2024, where hopefully we can continue to bring you entertainment, and we can't wait to have you all there for our journey. Until then, you've been listening to a Master's Degree in Rolling Terribly. I've been your host, Detty, and alongside me, the one and only Gaz.
And remember, when it comes to celebrating Christmas, it's all in the wrist.